the president of the Providence Teachers Union. She's been here before. Maribeth Calabro, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it because it's been quite the week. Started off with a little school vacation.
Brief.
The brief school vacation, but what we've seen in the aftermath of Florida. There's been, as we know, a number of school shootings this year alone, but there seems to be an even increased call for something to be done. We've seen the president come out and say that he believes teachers should be armed. What's the conversation you're having with your membership right now?
The conversation is that we have to focus on the absurdity of the statement, and I don't believe that arming teachers is the best line of defense in keeping our children safe. We have a significantly difficult job to do to begin with, and I don't think walking around with a gun strapped to my leg or strapped to my waist is going to make my job any easier. Our first and foremost important task is to keep and ensure the safety of our children, and that starts with at the ground with ensuring that we have fireproof, bulletproof doors, windows, locks on the doors that work, keys that work in the doors with the locks. So there are some very fundamental things that can happen from the onset before we talk about arming teachers. I've spoken to hundreds of teachers over the past week, and everyone from teachers who own guns for personal gaming, etc., game shooting, etc., to people who have either been in the military or continuing in the military, and not one person has said, "Yes, give me a gun. I can't wait to show up at school with a gun on Monday."
So you talk about the measures that they are looking for. Does it vary by school to school? Do you hear from teachers that say there's several classrooms where the doors don't lock properly? We have concerns about these safety measures as they currently exist. Is there a variance amongst schools as to how sort of beefed up they are security-wise?
Yeah, I think that there is. I think that is part and parcel of the fact that we have a wide range of schools at different ages, and that were built at different ages. We also have, and this is not a secret, I've talked about this before, how we have schools that are in disrepair. And so, when the normal course of business is happening and we're teaching kids, we're not thinking about, is the door locked, is the screen bulletproof? We don't think about those things because we're doing what we're trained to do, which is teach. So yes, there are varying degrees of safety within our schools, within our system, within our state, within our country. And I think that we need to get together and come together unified as teachers and parents and management, and talk about the best ways to secure our children so that they can come to school to learn, which is the purpose of schools.
And we earlier this week, Maribeth, had Representative Greg Amorian, who's going to be putting forth a couple pieces of legislation. The second of which we discussed before I go back to the first was reimbursing schools under this proposal by the governor for school rehabilitation. Does that seem like a no-brainer? Do you think that this will pass?
I hope it will pass. I pray it will pass. To me, it's a no-brainer. To the teachers who are in these buildings that are crumbling, and the parents of these children who are in buildings that are crumbling and in disrepair, it seems to be a no-brainer. At the end of the day, I can't imagine being in the thought process of all of the legislators, but my hope would be that there would be enough behind this process that they would get on board and support fixing our schools.
And what about his proposal, school resource officers in every school, not just middle schools and high schools? He talked about the cost perspective. Do elementary schools need school resource officers?
I can tell you that there are times and places that they may be necessary, and I think that in order to have a holistic approach to what's going on in this country and in terms of school shootings, that should be a consideration. And above and beyond that, there needs to be holistic training for educators, staff members, administrators on mental health issues and what red flags we can look for in terms of students who are in crisis, and then what to do about it. And we don't currently have that. It doesn't exist right now. We don't have full-time social workers, school psychologists, guidance counselors, elementary through high. We don't have processes and procedures in place for identification of children in crisis or who have maybe shown their hand like this young man did in Florida.
And you talk about there's going to be that red flag legislation introduced, but that's community-wide. That's just not focused on schools.
No, exactly.
Is there concern amongst teachers when they have concerns about a particular student? And you just pointed out they're just not getting the resources that they need. They say, this student is troubled. I have concerns that they might harm themselves or harm others. Talk about if a student makes a threat at school, and it might not be, I'm going to shoot up the school, but there's a threat there. What's the process that they go through before being allowed back into the school after some sort of, again, indication that there could be an issue?
So it depends upon what the issue would be, but we have protocols, processes in place for students who are considering harming themselves or others, those who have the hit lists of the, years ago, and those who talk about, starting fires or shooting or whatever the case may be. And in middle and high school, there is a concerted effort with guidance counselors and support staff, nurses, and then it goes through the chain of command. We either call a rescue or an ambulance, and then hopefully they get the services that they so desperately need. Elementary, it's a little trickier because we don't have guidance counselors in every school. So it's incumbent upon the school nurse teacher or the administrator to understand and realize these red flags and work with outside agencies, which we have partnered with because we have such a lack of support staff in that area.
And so keeping students safe, your job also with teaching the students and their concerns as well. We just saw today, students from classical walked to the State House. How have teachers been dealing with students post these incidents that have fears, have concerns, as they're trying to teach and do their job when you have a young population that might be really fearful?
And they are fearful, and there's so much to be fearful about in this day and age. We have a lot of students who fear ICE and the DACA and legislation, and we have students now who are obviously fearful of large mass shootings in schools, and it's difficult for us because it's hard for adults to grapple with the issue to begin with. We can't fathom it, understand it, and we don't know how to explain it. So, our best bet is to remain empathetic and try to utilize the tools that are around us, the support systems that we have, outside agencies, community partners, to come in and have real conversations with kids. And those conversations obviously would be different depending upon the age of the child.
And we just saw today in Cranston, the City Council President is going to be putting forth a proposal in Cranston for metal detectors in schools, lock boxes for guns, for people who are legally allowed to carry. Again, this is the Republican head of the Cranston City Council. Metal detectors, lock boxes, what's your response?
I think there are other things that we can do prior to getting to that, police state, if you will. I think that, if we could provide more supports for our students in schools and supports for our families who are in crisis and may not know how to deal with a child who's exhibiting red flags or is journaling like that young man did, or the young woman whose grandmother turned her in. Those are things that we are right here, right now, low cost, high impact things that we can do. As for metal detectors, I think it's a hefty price tag, and I don't think you can put a price tag on children's safety. But I think it like I said before, it needs to be holistic. It can't be a one-off. Let's do metal detectors and everybody's going to be safe. That's not. It's more global than that. We have a lot of work to do.
And do these conversations really, as you mentioned, this is Cranston, your Providence, how many of them take place really at the district level, and how many really take place at the statewide?
Well, I can attest to the fact that the superintendent and I have had several conversations along with Joe DePina, our chief operating officer, about safety and security, and we have an emergency preparedness document that covers everything from plane crashes to active shooters. So we are hyper vigilant as a group in terms of making sure and ensuring the safety and security of our students. We've done lockdown drills over the past week. Over the past couple of days since the shooting. We've reinforced the process and procedures for evacuation drills, etc. So they're being extremely proactive in the district. But I do think that it's a statewide issue, and I think that we would be best served to all come together and get on the same page in terms of what we can do, again, low cost to the extent that we can, because we're all in fiscal dire straits, but with the most impact to ensure the safety of our children.
We talk about the psychological stress on students, the psychological stress on teachers. We've seen since these incidents these heroic acts of these educators, these teachers who put themselves to save children's lives. And
Yes.
I mean, what do you hear from the teachers in terms of this? They're there to be educators, and now they're faced with this daunting possibility that they're also supposed to be the safeguards of these students in these events.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've read a couple of things over the past couple of days online about conversations that have been had in high school classrooms about kids saying, oh, you don't have to protect us, it's not your job to protect us. But, you know, teachers, we're in the business of being people, right? This is a people relationship business. And so that's what we do. We're protective of our children. We're overprotective of our children. We want what's best for our children. So there is a lot of stress involved with that. And I think that, you know, providing services, and we have, you know, employee assistance programs so that teachers can talk about and talk through their questions, their concerns, their stressors, any triggers that they may be having. And we have realized an uptick in anxiety and other mental health issues that are related to mass shootings like this.
Well, I wanted to get your perspective again here, following what we've seen, not just from last week, but the response that we've seen from the president as well. But the last time I saw you, Maribeth, was up at City Hall, taking on the mayor there for the contract with the teachers. What's the next steps there?
Actually, the mayor reached out to me this week, and I had contacted him back, and he and I are going to sit down this coming week and try to build back a bridge. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
Again, because as what he had put forth was what, 0-0 for pay raises? What was the 3 years?
0-0 and maybe 0.5, I believe.
So do we see room for compromise?
Again, I've always been ready to negotiate and willing to negotiate. We're not immune to the fact that there is a budget deficit in the city, and we get that. We're not asking for 5, 10, and 15% either. So there needs to be a reasonable belief on the other side that we have earned this pay raise or a pay raise, and we're basically looking for equity. So you know, as the leader of the city, in my mind's eye anyway, as a leader of my union, I think about contracts that I have coming up in the budget season, and I think about all these people need to get paid, so I have this bucket of money, and that doesn't seem to have happened. We seem to have been left off of the thought process. So, you know, they knew they had to pay the firefighters, they knew they had to pay the police, and they knew they had to pay 1033. He should have known, and I'm sure he did, because he sat next to me writing, you know, signing the last contract, that we were having a contract coming up as well. So I think he should have been better served to disperse the money that he had at his discretion a little more equitably.
And having been there at the rally before the state of the city, you know, one of the points that the teachers have been making is the mayor's been touting that the city's in such great fiscal condition.
January 3rd, he said they have a $5.4 million surplus, and January 16th, they got nothing. For us, anyway. They have nothing for teachers. And, you know, it's not lost on my membership that on January 17th, him in the position of acting as the board, and he is the chair of the Board for Achievement First, he put forth a resolution for them to engage in the purchase of $3.5 million piece of property on Westminster Street, diagonally across from 2 schools that are basically crumbling around him. And you know, to the loss of about $35 million to the district in terms of student aid. You know,
Can't really
if it walks
have
like
it
a
both.
duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck, you know, I mean, you can't have it both ways.
So when he says that the city's in good fiscal standing,
Mhm.
do you think, and as you point out, and then saying that there's no money for the teachers, do you think the city's in good financial standing?
I do believe that he did have a surplus, and I do believe that he bucketed off portions of that surplus to different places, and I also believe in my heart of hearts that Providence teachers weren't a priority for those buckets.
Well, we'll see what happens moving forward. You're meeting with the mayor next week. I appreciate
Tuesday.
your taking the time to come in here after
Thank
a
you.
very tumultuous week to talk right to the viewers about the state of the teachers here in Providence. So Maribeth,
Thank
hopefully
you.
we'll talk soon.
Nice
Let you go
seeing you.
around the corner. Okay.
Thank you.
Have a
Nice
good
seeing
weekend.
You too.
Maribeth Calabro, the president of the Providence Teachers Union, wanted her in here this week, as we've seen following Florida from President Donald Trump talking about arming teachers. We've also seen proposals around the state for increased school safety measures. Talked with her a little bit about some legislative proposals and how she plans to act moving forward. So appreciate Maribeth taking the time to come into the studio. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be back with our next guest here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.